Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. Your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump. And now your hosts, Brendan Cottrell, Rachel Cottrell, and Keaton Dodd.
Hi, Brahman fans. I'm your host, Rachel Cottrell, and today we are pleased to present our episode featuring Jim Reeves, a legend in the seedstock cattle business who served as the ABBA Executive Vice President from 1996 to 2004, which was during the last monumental celebration of ABBA's 75th anniversary. In this podcast, Mr. Reeves shares with us his insight on the Brahman breed's role in the big picture of the beef industry, some challenges and opportunities facing the breed, and how he encourages breeders to work together in a spirit of unity and cooperation to keep moving the breed forward. I loved it, and I know you will too. So let's get over the hump. Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. Today we are so privileged to have with us Jim Reeves, who served the American Brahman Breeders Association as Executive Vice President from 1996 to 2004. And he has just a wealth of knowledge, not just about the Brahman breed, but the general beef industry as well. So I'd like to start off by saying welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Rachel. It's an honor for me to get to visit with you.
So I feel like there's so much we could discuss, but I do feel like we should start to give our listeners just a little bit of background on your illustrious career in the beef industry, not just with Brahman, but before Brahman, how you got to Brahman, and even after Brahman, because it's really amazing. If you would just be willing to share a little bit of that with our listeners.
Certainly, Rachel. I'd be glad to. My career basically in the seed stock production and the registered cattle industry started back in 1972 when I was an ag teacher right out of college. I'd been teaching for just a few years, and I got a phone call from the Texas Angus Association asking me if I would consider taking over the executive secretary position with the Texas Angus Association, which I had been in the purebred cattle business my whole life. I was a member of the very first National Junior Angus Association way back when I was 6 or 7 years old, but very, very acquainted with both the purebred side, and we also had a pretty large commercial cattle operation in Abilene and Albany. And so I agreed to do that, and that started a career on the seed stock side, on the purebred and the registry side. From there, I ended up having an offer to manage one of the top Angus firms in the United States. We were breeder of the entire United States for 2 years in a row. And from there, I got a phone call from a friend of mine that I used to rodeo with, and he was president of the Santa Gertrudis Association. And he asked me if I would come and speak to them, and they were going through some growth and some problems that I know the people in the Brahman industry would also be able to identify with. They were under continual attack by British breeders from the north. and their market share was diminishing. And I just went down and told them like it was, and basically thought they would probably tar and feather me rather than welcome me after I talked over an hour telling them what I felt like they were doing wrong, and that they, through the politics in their association and misdirection from the leadership, that they had put a good breed of cattle in jeopardy of being even to the point of extinction. So rather than tar and feather me, they offered me the job to take over that association. So I did. I went to Kingsville and I worked with them through some really, really hard times when they had completely lost identity in the beef industry. And then two different times I was approached by the American Brahman Association to see if I would be interested in taking over and following a dear friend of mine, Wendell Shrunk. And the first interview, they said I didn't fit because of their budget. And they hired another gentleman who was there for a short while. They called me and asked me if I'd come up for a second interview. And I did. And I shared my opinions on what the Brahman breed needed to do to get back into the ball game in the beef industry. And they offered me the job, and I took it. So from that point on, it was Brahman all the way, and I completely sold out and became probably, this was in the word of the president of the American Angus Association, I was the worst adversary they had ever faced in the Angus business. But all I ever did, Rachel, is I just demanded that truth be told, and that's all. And that was it was really an attack on the American Angus Association in the area of being truthful and understanding that all breeders in the United States, in order to maximize profits, had to develop their own percentage of cattle breeds because, like all of us in the United States, cattle still sell by pounds, and there's a lot of things to take in that you can get in trouble going too far anyway. But that was my introduction to the Brahman breed. I relished the time. I feel really, really good about things that we accomplished while I was there. And I will admit the challenge continues. And but we have the ability, because this breed is unique, and whether the industry recognizes it or not, they'll never be able to maximize potential profits until they know how to utilize Brahman genetics in their cow herd.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's really interesting to point out that you were serving as the CEO of the ABBA during its 75th anniversary. And approaching in 2024, we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of ABBA. And you kind of talked about this already, but if you would share with us, what is your take on, what was the state of the Brahman breed then versus now? Have we made progress? What do we need to work on? What's your take on that?
Well, Rachel, it's really simple, and it's not a unique problem with the Brahman Association. In my career, I held the position of president of the U.S. Beef Breeds Council, and that was over all the pure breeds in the United States. And it was amazing to me how, when we would gather as a council, we would share the challenges and problems that we all faced as CEOs of these beef breeds, and every one of them have the same. Unfortunately, one of the major problems that is so destructive is when personal politics among the leadership began to take a priority, and you take your eye off the ball. Basically, you are misdirected towards challenges that deals with personalities and with personal preferences rather than what is going to benefit the breed and the breeders. The fiduciary responsibility of the CEO of any organization is to maximize profits of every member. So when I came on board, a friend of mine, I mentioned Wendell Shrunk, had been there for many years, and he had basically given up on being able to get the politics out of ABBA. So I knew that my first challenge was to try to become an intermediary between um, basically feuds. You talk about the Hatfields and the McCoys. There were a couple of major breeders in the United States that were in positions of leadership that refused to ever consider getting along. They would rather fight than they would to address any problem that faced the breed. So the first thing I did was I got together personally with two of the factions, and as a result was able to calm the troops a little bit so we could get down to addressing the problems that the breed, not the breeders, but that the breed faced in order to better fit within the beef industry. So that was my goal. And with God's help, I was able to calm the troops. And we kind of turned back leadership wise towards facing the real issues that were attacking the Brahman genetics within the industry.
Mhm. Yeah, I was reading in one of your columns in researching this that one of your early columns, you were issuing basically a call for harmony in the association, for everybody to get along, like you said, and work towards the breed. And one thing I also researched during that time is that y'all really you put together a lot of educational events and social events too, which I would think would help boost that goodwill between the members. You want to talk about some of those, the field days, the parties, any of that kind of stuff?
Well, Rachel, the biggest challenge to once again get our eye back on the ball that really would project the Brahmins' importance in the beef industry, we had to present a unified front. In order to do that, I wanted to try to force inclusion of those that had been fighting factions within our breed and to let them join on an agreed goal of benefiting the association. And the best way to do that is getting them unified on things that really matter. And that, first of all, primarily is education. Our breed needed educating. There were a lot of breeders that had been loyal to this breed for years and years, but actually didn't know exactly why they preferred the Brahman breed, other than that's what they had always done. So education was my big desire, is we need to educate our breeders so that they can put an educated front out there locally where they were producing in defending their production, defending and uh, calling attention to the benefits that they were able to provide. And I not only wanted to bring together unity among the breed, it was also unity with the international people. So I started organizing international projects where we would offer to go put a 1, 2, or 3 day seminar, educational. I'd try to bring in not only experts from the U.S., but from local countries that were involved in the beef industry, especially on the educational side of it. And we found that as we did that, the American Brahman breed established themselves once again as leaders internationally in producing the best Brahman genetics that were available. But we did all kinds of things. Even you were talking about social events. we tried to get breeders together to have fun and to start liking one another. Because it was really discouraging to me when I would hold meetings in certain areas and we found there were factions that not only didn't like each other, they hated each other and would do everything they could to undermine any kind of advancement that other breeders within their area were making. And so, I found out that in ABBA, the enemy, first of all, existed within us rather than all of our enemies being outside of us. So I wanted to address that as one of my priorities. Getting our breeders to like one another, talking with one another, visiting, being socially inclusive within their areas of production. And I felt like we were getting that done quite well.
Well, when you look, I completely agree that we have to work together. Our enemy is not each other. Our enemy, so to speak, might be the plant-based burger, or just putting the message out there about the benefits of the beef industry as a whole. So I completely agree. Well, one of the things I remember is under your leadership, you held the National Brahman Show out in Sacramento, California in '99. And from my research, that was definitely the first time it was held on the West Coast, and really one of the few times it hasn't been in Texas or Louisiana. I think there was maybe one or two times in Mississippi and maybe once in Oklahoma. And that really spoke to me about your inclusion of the national scene of Brahman. But kind of what made y'all want to go out there and have the show in Sacramento?
Well, a lot of that came from my experience within the Angus Association. There were a lot of top-notch livestock breeders, seed stock producers in California, and I was close friends with the guy that had the California State Fair at Sacramento, Mike Bradley. He and I judged shows for him and showed under uh, his leadership out there in Sacramento. And we had a little hot spot that I identified in California of some very excited breeders. And we also had breeders that were popping up in Arizona and places across the desert kind of country out there. And I just said, we need to go out there because their attitude was if it wasn't in Texas, if it wasn't in Hungerford, Texas, then it wasn't a sanctioned event by the American Brahman Association, countered by those breeders that felt the same way about Louisiana, and then again in Florida.
Mhm.
So we had done very well moving to the East Coast or Southeast, where our cattle are basically a necessity for good commercial producers. I wanted to try to take that same enthusiasm to the West Coast to expand our markets because a lot of the people that I found at NCBA were West Coast producers, large ones that were so critical of the Brahman influence and Brahman genetics as a whole. And I wanted to take and show them good Brahman cattle out there because they had never seen any. The average commercial producer in California, Washington, Oregon, all on the West Coast had never seen the product that we had evolved over the years as the American Brahman. So I started working with Mike Bradley and got him to finally help me incentivize our board's consideration of taking the show out there. And it was a big step, and it was a chancy type thing to do. But as a result, we brought in several really top breeders out there who unfortunately have kind of gone to the background now. But at that time, the Brahman shows in California took a big boost. We went to the Cow Palace. and we just had some really nice shows out there. But the incentive was to try to move our market base of getting our top cattle into the purview of those larger commercial producers out there, which we did. And I talked to people in Indian reservations out there who purchase bulls for their programs, and we incentivize them to step up. But it was just a chance we took, and at that time, it proved to be successful. And I know that it hasn't been maintained over the years, but there is a big market out there, and there are some good cattlemen out there that, with education, would want to utilize Brahmin influence.
Oh yeah, I would have been 20 years old at the time, a student at A&M, and I got to exhibit out there, and it was just a wonderful show. I was lucky that I got to fly out there. My grandpa didn't want to. He was scared to fly on an airplane by himself, and so I got the luxury of accompanying him and Nana on the trip, and I didn't have to drive out there, and that was really nice. So
Well,
yeah.
there's some of us that did make the drive several times out there.
Yeah. So that leads me to another topic I want to talk about, which is you created the idea of having this unhaltered competition for Brahmin. And I know we held at least one of these, like, maybe more commercially oriented pin shows. Um, and even recently on Facebook, I saw in a discussion group that some Brahmin breeders were talking about that and how they thought it was such a cool concept. And, it didn't necessarily carry on till today, but I know people would love to hear what that concept was and how it worked, the times that y'all did hold it.
Well, Rachel, it goes back to my heritage. I was born and raised up in the Fort Worth area, and my grandfather, when they first started the Texas and Southwestern Fat Stock Show and Rodeo, we called it, at Fort Worth, that was held out on the north side of Fort Worth in the stockyards area now. But the very first livestock shows we had there were primarily people who brought their cattle to sell them right there. That was the main purpose, is to give people a marketplace for the top genetics. Well, over the years, as the livestock show ring has morphed into a completely different animal today than it was in the origins, and I've given this speech to the Association of Livestock Rodeos. They asked me to come and speak. And to me, one of the detrimental parts, and I'm going to say in ABBA particularly, is you have what is called show ring boys, and then you've got Brahman breeders or commercial breeders. And again, one of my desires is unifying our breed. And so the average breeder out there who did not show cattle, he always spoke disparagingly about all those guys that just drag them up down the road and are their whole life is built around a belt buckle or a ribbon. And they almost felt like they were a cancer. And my desire was to get back into breeders' minds that this was a place that was one of the best opportunities to advertise your program. It was in a hopefully non-hostile, competitive way, but it would allow people that did not want to fit, break, and haul show cattle, yet give them an opportunity to experience that competitive attempt to measure up with other breeders around in an atmosphere that was more uh, inducive to attracting commercial cattle people too, because we had these shows were judged by judges horseback, kind of bringing back a little of the old days into it. which was attractive to a lot of people. Uh, and and what I did is I got in my attempt to bring unification into our breeders, I had my judges were picked. There were three judges, not one. There was three judges. One of them was a representative of seed stock production. Second one had to be a representative of the beef industry, as in end product. The third had to be that feeder that utilized the livestock and taking it from the producer or the cow calf producer all the way to the packer. So I had three judges. I put on 6 of these shows around the nation with 3 different breeds. And the thing that I saw, first of all, was it was hard to find a judge that knew how to ride a horse. Well, which to me, that's 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 a sad situation when our industry has gotten to where we don't even have guys that know how to ride a horse. But because some of the areas in the United States, that's the only mode they have of working their cattle. That second challenge, they said you'll never get those 3 segments of the industry to agree on what is the best cow. Well, I did 6 of them. And like one of them I put on at the State Fair in Dallas, I had Glenn Blodgett, who died this last year but ran 4 6s. I had the gentleman that ran the Wagner Ranch in one of them. I had some of the biggest ranchers in the nation that were there horseback giving their opinion. Then I had packers. It was hard to find an educator in animal science that knew how to ride or that wasn't scared of horses. But I found them. And the most amazing thing, they agreed. I hung clipboards on the saddle horn, and we had outriders in the arena to manage the cattle. And we brought them in and we judged them. They agreed 100% of the time. So that was amazing. But my attempt was is to stop the division between quote unquote show cattle people and real breeders, as they referred to themselves. So that was an effort I made, and I was experiencing some success in it at one time.
Yeah, I think that divide, so to speak, it's still very prevalent today, and I wish that was an area that our breed could work together. It's not just our breed. I mean, you see it in Angus too. There's definitely the show crowd and then the commercial crowd, and
Absolutely.
it's just widespread across the whole industry. But it would be great if we could get more on the same page, you know. And to me, maybe the common factor between that is at the end of the day, we're all producing beef,
Yes.
beef to feed our fellow man. And
Yes.
I'd like to move into that topic as well a little bit because, I mean, as you know, we have a beef program, a Brahman beef program. When I started it, everybody said I was crazy, and now we ship nationwide. I'm completely sold out. I can't keep it in stock. My best seller is the Brahman hump. We sell that hump piece of meat for $65 each. So I'm actually adding $130 per head per carcass just by selling the hump, which is the thing they use to I guess, detract against Brahman. But back in, so heart healthy beef is one of the main benefits we talk about in Brahman. But you were actually the guy that got that whole thing started. Back when you were with the ABBA in the early 2000s, you started that research on Brahman beef, and that was 24 years ago. And I really wish had the ABBA taken that and ran with it at that time, where we would be now. But can you walk us through that? Talk about the research. I know you were very heavily involved with NCBA getting, and actually your research, I think with Dr. Frankie, is what set the foundation for the ABBA carcass EPDs that we use today. So can you tell us about that?
Well, Rachel, that has been a pet project that I wanted to bring to the forefront of ABBA because it seemed to me, and I might say, in all honesty, it still exists to a alarming degree in the Brahman breed, is they have accepted a a title to be hung around their neck that they are just female producers. That female Brahman commercially is the only valuable thing. Uh, no one, they say, wants Brahman bulls. And to me, I thought, well, what is that based on? And I don't know if you want me to go into, you and I have talked about the Certified Angus Beef program and the fallacies that are in that program. But to me, there is no reason why we couldn't devote effort into promoting Brahman beef. Brahman beef did have a heart friendly aspect to it. I have proof that if tenderness is addressed, that the largest survey that's ever been done by the National Cattlemen's Association, the largest consumer survey, came out with results that they didn't want to accept. But the fact was, it was well established that if tenderness is taken out of the equation, the human tongue desires the select grade over choice. But the challenge is to get a palatable select, because they even graded the select beef higher in juiciness over choice. And I said, how can that be? Because we know that choice has more marbling or more interstitial fat than what select does. How can it be less juicy? Well, professors told me that research shows that's called the halo effect. If a product tastes really good, the human secretes their own saliva and creates the juiciness within their mouth, and it's all based on taste. And anybody that's been around, if you go chicken fried steaks or whatever that usually uses the select grade, that the select grade tastes better than choice. I mean, has a natural flavor that's better. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to say, okay, let's accept the fact that we've got a challenge to get into the choice, and I know that we have made really good efforts in getting into the choice grade, but let's take care of that select grade for the majority of our producers out there, and let's try to zero in on the tenderness factor, which I spent hours and hours, late nights, working on how we would try to increase the tenderness within the Brahman industry, as we had to deal with the enzyme called calcistatin. But anyway, back to the beef industry, we had to try to get the acceptability of purebred Brahman steers into the vocabulary, or at least the thoughts, of those packers and feeders. And so that was why I was really trying to move in to try to identify certain qualities of Brahman meat that set them apart, would make them more valuable, even if they had to create a niche market for it. But all of those attempts, I can't say I was able to accomplish what I wanted to before I decided I needed to go into another career field. But that, Rachel, is so important.
Brahman beef is the next big thing in the meat industry. Known for its great flavor along with heart-healthy benefits, Brahman beef is taking the country by storm. Brahman Country Beef features great-tasting, heart-healthy beef raised by BRC Ranch. We ship nationwide, with everything from premium steaks to briskets, ground beef, and even hard-to-find cuts like tri-tip, picanha, oxtails, and the elusive Brahman Hump. Visit BrahmanCountryBeef.com and start your order today.
You're absolutely right, though, because when we sell our beef, the thing that people comment is the flavor is just unbelievable. They
Absolutely.
describe the flavor as something they've never experienced before, and we definitely have a product there for sure. And it's growing. It's not where it needs to be, but it is growing. And I do think a lot of that work that you did start, it's being used today, and especially through the carcass EPDs that you helped create. I think our tenderness is better than where we were, and for us, like right now in our herd, we're a very high percentage choice. And I guess our position statement to our crossbreeding customers is, no, I'm not going to improve your quality grade, but I'm not going to hurt it either. So if you've got the Angus genetics, the Hereford genetics, and you use our Brahmins that have this good carcass basis, you're not going to get docked at it when you sell on a grid. And I think that's a good place for Brahmin to be.
Well, I'm just telling you, Rachel Cottrell, your husband, Brandon, and I have been fortunate over the years to be asked to judge a lot of shows. But when I see animals like you guys are striving to produce with the natural muscling, the efficiency I think of gain, then I say, who out there is going to be able to equal? And I know you and Brandon are two blooming, I don't know, bashful. But let me just tell you something. I worked my career within the BIF, the Beef Improvement Federation. To those of you out there that don't know what that is, but that is basically a British and continental organization, because they had the first EPDs, or predictors of performance, developed by scientists. And I was a part of that my entire career. And when I saw that you guys were the seed stock producer of the year, I fainted, because
Thank you.
that never could have happened in the past. There was no way a Brahman breeder would be recognized by BIF, because when I came on board, our EPDs, no one knew what they were. Nobody for sure wanted to use them, and they couldn't
It
even
might be
they couldn't
currently
even
the
they couldn't even spell EPD. So all I say is, y'all, and there are other breeders within ABBA that have gotten serious about giving yourself the ammunition that your British and continental people have been so successful in using against us. And it was high time we armed ourselves with the same ammunition. And you guys have done that, and you've gained respect in BIF, which BIF was black. I'm just going to tell you, it was another organization like, and I've told you the background, but NCBA stands for Northern Cowboys Breeding Angus. And so I found that out the hard way of fighting them for 25 years. But I can tell you this, that if we do not pull our heads out in the Brahman breed and realize that we too can play that game, there are ways to take scientific data and prove that we have a product, even on the purebred side, that's not only compatible, but you have proven is desirable above other genetics for that steak that you lay on your plate. So hats off to you. And that's not part of the podcast, but I'm just saying that anybody that doesn't recognize to be a seed stock producer of the year for the Beef Improvement Federation, you're asleep with your head in the wrong place if you don't realize how important that is to the whole breed, not just
Oh,
to one breeder, but we
it's
can
very
compete.
Yeah, really look forward to going to the BIF convention every summer, and we kind of take a family vacation there. And so, I encourage any Brahmin breeder to look up that BIF convention, and they're held across the USA, usually at different universities, and you can just change your program by going to those and learning and listening to the experts, and really just kind of opening your eyes to the bigger picture of the beef industry. It's amazing. Um,
Well,
well, I would like to.
likewise, Rachel, when I came on board, I had been with previous breeds that I ran. I never missed a National Cattlemen's Association meeting. I was on their science and technology committee for years. And when I came on board ABBA, not only were they unfamiliar, they never go. And I would ask Wendell in previous relationship, why don't you go with me to help me fight the battle at National Cattlemen's? Don't do us any good, and the leadership doesn't want me to go. And that just floored me because that's where the battle is raging for placing ourselves within the thought pattern of the American beef industry. You got to be there. That's where policies are formulated that affect every breeder from South Texas to South Florida and Louisiana. Those
Absolutely.
policies are made at the National Cattlemen's, but we weren't there. We
Yeah,
weren't
we love
there.
that one too. And I know we're within the Brahmin. I know the Kempfers are pretty active in NCBA, and they're great representatives for us. But for the breed, you know what I mean. And I wish that more Brahmin breeders would go for sure.
Yes, yes.
Well,
As an
uh,
army.
yes, for sure. We've talked about a lot of Brahmin big picture stuff, but let's talk about the ABBA for a minute, and just some questions I'd like to get your opinion on. One thing we always hear is that the size of the ABBA board is too big. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I'll probably lose friends over this, but it's too big. Uh,
Hmm.
I question a lot of the mechanics that goes into the selection of your leadership at ABBA. I was
Hmm.
blessed to have some good gentlemen and ladies that were on that board, but it's just like in churches. The larger your board is, you can slow down business accomplished by half the larger every time you increase the size of the board.
Hmm.
People worry
Yeah.
about people worry about, well, uh, if we don't have enough of our representative of the way we feel like things ought to be run, then the enemy is going to get more votes and get directors on that board that are going to not give me the favoritism that I want in policy, in rules. And so everyone goes in to ABBA's board of directors with an agenda. And it's an agenda that was fabricated by a lot of people that get together with a certain feeling. It would be so much more beneficial to be able to have, rather than the size of board that we have, if you just had a board of directors of 10 people and your executive committee could be 3. But I
Mhm.
guarantee you could get business done. And the only thing that protects you is the criteria for becoming a board member. If you would increase the restrictions on who is eligible to run, and not just the size of their deal, but the experience that they have, I think. And if you've got a good executive director who he is
Mhm.
not wet behind the ears in beef cattle politics around the entire United States, he needs to be able to give direction. And when you get people in there And the number one thing on a board member is integrity. Another thing is they've got to be uh, they've got to believe in their own wisdom. And that comes a lot of times through experience. But if you had the right kind of board of directors, they could move the American Brahman Association light years ahead every year.
Mhm.
But it
Yeah.
just takes it just the larger, and as long as there are ways, and you and I know there are ways you can buy yourself onto the board of directors. And if that is not addressed, it's a guarantee that you will not have productive decisions coming out of the board. And you're not going to get the
Mhm.
leadership that you need to provide to your executive director when you have one.
Yeah, that's right. When I look at, to me, with like the structure of any successful business and breed association, is you got to have that visionary leader, CEO at the top who can see the big picture, like of the industry, and then he or she has to have a capable staff that can take these big ideas and implement them, like across their various departments. And
Exactly.
I know you had that sort of staff when you were there at ABBA. I mean, you had hired Chris Shivers. You had DeWilda, Armelinda was there. It was, but that's the structure of how you get things done. And then your directors, they're your boots on the ground. They're your grassroots representatives of our association. So I
I,
completely agree.
well, I mean, they need to be every uh, board member needs to realize their role and their responsibility as an ambassador, not just as a referee
Mhm,
with a whistle. That's what you have so
mhm,
oftentimes is you have directors that come on the board not because of a calling, not because of a desire to improve the breed, but they have an axe to grind. There's somebody they're going to go after that's getting more power than they have. And so their agenda, the last thing on their mind is to be a beef ambassador to the breeders they represent. And if you ever have a board member that goes back to his area and he starts having instructional, socializing events that will bring his membership together as a body, then he shouldn't be a director. If he is a director because he wants to have a whistle around his neck and wear a striped shirt, we don't need him. We just don't need
mhm.
him. Stay home. You need somebody who really eats and breathes improvement of the breed and thereby improving their own marketability of their product. But I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I just have not seen that. And it's really hard to do. And,
Well,
it's almost like, if you want to be in a Fortune 500 board member, you are going to be vetted 8 ways from Sunday. And when you get
mhm.
on that board, they know for a fact that you have additive wisdom that will help them increase the profitability of that board or that company. ABBA
Yeah,
does it popularity wise, or if you buy enough memberships.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, great example of what you were just describing is there is a lady named Sienna Briles who was just elected out on the East Coast. And that lady is a worker. And she was having field days, Facebook groups, hosting shows. Like she was working. And due to her energy, that area out there has just gotten on fire. Like they are passionate about Brahmins. And it just shows, like you said, all it takes is one or two people with pure motives and pure intentions to grow the breed, to represent the breed. And so much good can come out of it if people are doing it with the right intentions.
Exactly. Well, it goes back to the definition of leadership. You know, again, if you're a leader, then you are out to succeed in a battle. And you're
Mm-hmm.
not there to get more stripes on your sleeve or awards on your chest. You're there to win the war. That's a real leader. And to me, if you have
Yeah.
your directors come on board, they don't even, I'm sorry to say this, but as a whole, and it's not just the Brahman breed, you have got so many boards of directors where you have people that remind me of a coach that used to be the coach at Notre Dame, and they quote him all the time, Lou Holtz. When Lou Holtz graduated from high school, his counselor said, Lou, you need to go down to the plant, to the sawmill, and put your application in. He said, no, ma'am, I want to go to college. She said, Lou, honey, I've known you since the first grade. You need to go put your application for a job down at the mill. And he said, no, ma'am, I'm going to college. She said, Lou, there are people in the world that think they know what's going on. There are some people that know what's going on. Lou, honey, you're not even suspicious. And I think about board of directors that are elected to the board of directors, the policy makers of a breed, and they're not even suspicious. So I mean, we can just,
Well,
we could talk about, me. I'm getting up. I told them at Washington County this year. This was my farewell at judging. I've judged for 60 some odd years, and to me, it's time to let this new generation, if we believe that we're headed in the right direction with AJBA, there ought to be young men and women coming out of AJBA going to college that are coming out that are going to be a heck of a lot better judges than me. And we need to let those people go and get in there, get involved. So anyway,
I
I just,
that's a I wish as a whole our some of the older generation would agree with that because if you don't have a sustainability plan to empower and teach the younger generation, you have no future. And I put myself in the younger generation. I'm 40, but I need mentors who are experienced breeders and judges who are willing to pour that into me. And I think that we have so many great leaders in our organization that are maybe getting a little older. They have so much information. Our generation needs that information, but we also need to be able to be given the reins to take over and do some things and learn while we can still benefit from their expertise.
absolutely.
You know,
I
that
mean,
was
I learned from your grandfather. I learned from Bob Massey, all of those old guys. I stored it away, but I haven't had the opportunity to pass that on to another generation like they did to me.
that's what I would give an example when I was working with Dadall when he was still alive. He would let Brandon and I do things, and then if we were messing up, he wouldn't actually like point out that we were messing up, but he would ask a question like, "Well, do you think what if we did it this way, or do you think you might ought to think of this?" And it was a
Exactly.
really nice of saying you're messing up without saying you're messing up.
Yep.
It was, and I learned so much from that.
Well, that's true,
So
Rachel, but I'm going to tell you, your granddad and Bob Massey weren't that nice to me. They'd say, hey, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen you do. But they would explain it to me where I understood. So
yeah.
anyway, you're right. You're right. And it's just our breed. When you look back when I was actively involved in the associations, the average age of the producer of beef in the United States was 66 years old. That's a crying shame. I mean, if that's going to be a sustainable industry, we're not reaching out to that next generation. We're not handing off that passion that makes us tick to the next. I've got 3 kids. None of them want to own a cow, and that's been my whole life. Well, it's a failure on my part somehow, but it's also because it's not profitable, especially in the Brahman breed, to get in there unless you love the show ring and you want to be beat up on social media today about Brahman not having the best standing in the beef industry. I say wrong. I say wrong. I say it's time to fight. But I don't see people, even and I'm going to say on ABBA's board, but it's not just theirs. I don't see people in leadership positions that are willing to go to NCBA and stand up, that are willing to go to
Mm-hmm.
BIF and say, hey, we're here to be a part of this. You tell us what you think would bring our breed into a better position and standing. We'll do it. They don't go.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go. And that's where
Well,
policy that hurts us is developed.
you're right, but maybe we need to organize just like a trip to the NCBA or to the BIF. I mean, I know we go, but need to just round up some other Brahman breeders and say, hey, y'all, we've got to go. We need to go.
Yeah, a field trip.
Yeah. Yes.
That'd be a good idea. And I'm sure Brandon will kill you for coming up with it.
So, just in wrapping up, I mean, we've talked a lot about ABBA and the Brahman breed. Is there anything that, we've missed or we haven't talked about? Any, major accomplishments that you're very proud of, or any major challenges that you were able to work through that you want to talk about? Anything like that?
Well, I would like to plug the importance of your 100th anniversary. I know I put together the 75th, and I had Coleman as a president with me. And I approached a guy, Bob Tallman, which a lot of people know is the voice of rodeo in the United States, but a personal friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Bob, I want this to be special. And I think we did a fantastic job in the Astor Hall back on our 75th. And I'll be announcing the Brahman Show at Houston. And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
hoping that we're able to make it a point to heal wounds, to reach out, to reinvigorate breeders. I know there's some that are coming this year that are leaving right after certain inductions and not even staying for the show because that divide has become so deep. I just want,
Mm-hmm.
I want, like, can't we all get together? Can't we all get along? Can't we all realize that
Yeah.
our priority is this breed and it's not our ego? And that is a hard thing to do. But if there was a movement within ABBA to open your arms and say, let's put all of this aside as far as our own personal agendas, and let's think about what is best for this breed. This breed, and I can tell you from the time I started judging, and this would have been in the early 70s, when I started judging, the improvement in these cattle that I see in these large shows is just phenomenal. Breeders are producing animals that I don't care where you are, the bulls on your females are going to improve your product. And to me,
Mm-hmm.
if we would get our eyes off of the stands and look down in the arena and get proud and say,
Mm-hmm.
show me what you've got. We'll put our best against your best. And you're going to have to do that reaching out to universities. We've left that subject out, but I'm telling you, we're getting crucified in animal science labs around the entire United States because we have people that are not knowledgeable and certainly don't respect the Brahman influence on the commercial cow herd. And to me, that's something that leadership has got to address. We have got to become friends of academia, and we've
Mm-hmm.
lost that. A&M's making a little bit of a movement back, but I can tell you the days of Dr. Frankie and the days, of Pascal being out in the field, uh, promoting use of Brahman cattle, it's dying. And you're not making sure that we have replacements in these animal science professorships. And what we've done is rope-a-dope. We've just gotten into a corner and put our gloves over our head and saying, I hope they get tired of beating me up and then I can look up again. No, it's time to fight. I've been a fighter. The only time I stopped fighting was when I thought was best for the association, and I stopped. And that's the first time in my whole career that I stopped, and I regret it. I mean, we had some things going that, in hindsight, I should have stuck it out and seen them through because I did have a good staff. I really did. And but anyway, doing what's best for the organization may have not been what the Lord laid on my heart, but that's a decision I made that I might regret. But anyway, all I can say is my motto is move forward, keep up the fight, and take no prisoners, and punish the survivors. That's my motto.
That's a very powerful motto. That is a very powerful motto. I may need to implement that myself. Well, you know, for me, this conversation has been so good and positive and enlightening. And it's very evident that you love the Brahman breed and love many of the breeders, and that I would say you're one of the Brahman breed's largest cheerleaders. Even, today it's been, what, 20 years since you left the ABBA and moved to 4-H and other organizations, but you're still right there promoting and encouraging our breed. And for that, it's very appreciated.
Well, Rachel, I just want to, once again, to the younger breeders that are out there like you and Brandon, I am as proud as punch to see that you weren't willing to just leave status quo, that you see there's always room for improvement. And you guys
Yeah.
are doing it. There are other young people out there that I see as I have judged cattle across this country. You guys are just tickling the pants off of me that you don't accept what is today as being the end all. You got to keep pressing ahead because our enemies, and I hate to call them that, but our enemies in the beef breed, they don't sleep. And they're
Mhm.
fighting for existence like every other person in the beef industry. And a lot of their successes has been at the expense of the Brahman breed. And I hate that. I truly hate it. But I'm
Mhm.
enthused that, I mean, who would have ever thunk back in 1970s we would be on a podcast, and that there'll be somebody maybe out there that would listen that wouldn't normally have an opportunity to hear the thoughts and feelings of somebody that's been around the horn. And I'm just so
Yeah, well,
thankful. I'm thankful.
me too. And one thing I really like about these podcasts is I don't have to wear any makeup. I can just sit here. But I
Do you
forgot one major thing.
do you mean
I
I
had
didn't
to point out.
even comb my hair? Shucks. I, I got all
So
ready.
I this is big. You were the person that built the very first ABBA website. Do you remember that?
I do, and didn't know what I was doing.
I actually, so there's a way you can go back and like pull up any website at any given time. I don't know if you know that or not, but I did go back and pull it up, and it was like this green background with like a green marble
What
background.
what you
And that I'm going to post that picture on the show notes so that everybody can go back and see. But that was a pretty important step for our breed of creating that first website back in late '90s.
Oh, I know. And there were so many naysayers back then, and now, my goodness, if you don't have it, you're not even in the game.
Oh
So
yeah, no, exactly. Well, it has been a wonderful conversation, and I know this our listeners are going to love it. So once again, thank you so much for your sharing your story and your time and your expertise with us. It was amazing.
thank you, Rachel. I really am honored to be a part of this. And my prayer is that you guys will not only keep up the fight, but you'll have a lots of people that join in with you, because that's going to be the way that we're going to end up succeeding in this challenge that we have today. Is we've got to get unity back in the breed.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to Over the Hump podcast. Hey guys, we hope that you're enjoying the Over the Hump podcast. We've had so many great reviews and great feedback from this podcast, and we've had several people asking how they can support it. So we are proud to announce that we've created the Over the Hump fan club, where you can join and sign up on a yearly basis to help support this podcast and get some really cool merch as well. We have 3 different levels ranging from $40 a year to $250 a year. And at each level, you get some really cool different benefits and different free gifts. For example, at our Trailblazer level, you get a free copy of my really awesome Modern Brahman coffee table book, which is a 160-page coffee table book featuring the gorgeous photography of Carlos Guizora from Mexico, along with Brahman history written by me. And then our Supreme Stockman level, which is $250 a year, includes that plus free access to the Brahman Academy for 1 year. And at our Trailblazer and Supreme Stockman levels, you also get a discount to use in the BRC online store, which you can use for anything that's in the store, including semen, AI certificates, show cattle camp, event registrations, and more. So this is a really great opportunity, especially if you purchase a lot of semen or AI certificates from us. You can join the fan club and get some great discounts to use throughout the whole year. So if you like this podcast and want to help support it, you can sign up for the Over the Hump fan club at shopbrcutrer.com. That's shopbrcutrer.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you are enjoying it.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Cutrer. See you next time on the Over the Hump podcast.